Okay, so we spoke about last week. We are dealing with mission number 11. And what I want to do, I'll just read over the Mishnah, though we're not going to spend any time on the actual words of the Mishnah, and I'll remind you why in a moment. But the Mishnah said, Arba midos b'deos, that there are four dispositions, there are four types of characters. There is noach lichos v'noach lirtzos, a person who angers easily and who is calmed down easily. That's an emotional person. And we said by an emotional person, yotza schar b'hefsedo. So the schar that he gets for the fact that he is easy to be appeased is actually lost in the fact that he gets angry quickly, because he spends most of his life in anger, and it's really a negative sum game. Kasha lichos v'kasha lirtzos. We said that if it was hard to anger and hard to calm down, yotza hefsedo b'scharo. So in the end, your loss is offset by your gain, because the fact that you are hard to appease, at the end of the day, you're hard to get angry. So it takes a long time to get you angry, and in that long time that it takes to get you angry, that's a much greater advantage. You're angry less than the person who is easy to fly off the handle. And this is a description of a less emotional person, and that's why there's no value judgment here. We're not calling them righteous, we're not calling them wicked, we're not calling them anything. All we're saying is that this is, one is the loss is offset by the gain is offset by the loss. Then the Mishnah goes on to the value judgment. And the Mishnah says, Kasha lichos v'noach lirtzos, a person who is hard to anger, but easy to calm down, that's a chassid. Because a person who's hard to anger is a non-emotional person. It should take them a long time to be appeased once they get angry. And because this person has been a noach lirtzos, he calms down easily, so then he is making a commitment to calming down. He's making a commitment to making sure that the difficulty that exists between him and the other person, that goes away, that his anger is going to calm down, even though naturally he would stay angry. And therefore that person's a chassid, because he's working on himself, he's working on his anger, he's controlling himself. Noach lichos v'kasha lirtzos. Then we said a person who is easy to anger, but to get him to calm down could take forever. That's a rasha. That's a wicked person. Because again, that person is emotional, and an emotional person should be easy to calm down, but he is not easy to calm down because he has committed himself. He's dug his heels in the ground, has committed himself to staying angry. We pointed out that the main point of this Mishnah is the concept of self-control, of controlling your nature, recognizing your nature and controlling your nature, going beyond your nature. Not looking at it and saying, look, this is just who I am, this is how I was created, there's nothing I can do about this. Oh, yes, there is. I was created this way, but this is not necessarily the way that I'm not going to give into this. I'm going to work against this. The cards are stacked against me, but it doesn't matter, because I'm just not going to accept status quo, and I'm going to push beyond that nature. And we said that that's really ultimately what this Mishnah is teaching. This Mishnah is the second in the Mishnayos of the qualities of a righteous person that a person needs to develop in order to be able to receive the reward that God had said. In the very beginning of this chapter, we had mentioned this, that the world was created with 10 utterances to give reward for the righteous. And we're identifying the righteous so that we can understand who it is going to receive this kind of reward from God. The second step in righteousness is self-control. And not just self-control of holding yourself back, but of being able to push yourself beyond the things that are called your boundaries, the things you recognize are your boundaries and your nature. We spoke about that the women were rewarded with Rosh Chodesh, and the reason that they were rewarded with Rosh Chodesh was specifically because they went against their natures. They went against their natures because there were two events, the golden calf and the building of the tabernacle. The golden calf they did not participate in, the tabernacle they did, which meant that one of those two was against their nature. Either they're giving people, and they decided not to give, to go against their nature of being giving when it comes to the golden calf, or they're stingy people and they decided to go against their nature when it came to build the Mishkan, to build the tabernacle. Either way, once the second event happened, we know that one of these two events was against their nature. And therefore they were rewarded with Rosh Chodesh, with this incredible reward of Rosh Chodesh. Because this midah, this characteristic of being able to go against your nature, is something that God appreciates tremendously. Beautiful. But then we left with a very important question. And the question that we left with was, is that why do we have to teach about going against your nature and about controlling your nature? Why do we have to teach that within the context of anger? We could have taught that in the context of many other midot, many other characteristics, many other traits that a person develops and has. What was the importance and the necessity? What was the power of teaching it through anger? As we talk about these 4 characteristics of anger, and we say that if you control yourself for good, then you're a righteous person. Control yourself for bad, that's a negative, that's a wicked person. But I could have taught that, if you can learn how to control yourself in the arena of doing something good, you're a good person, and in the arena of doing something bad, you're a bad person. I could have taught it by happiness. I could have taught it by stinginess. I could have taught it by jealousy. There are so many things I could have taught it by. I could have said there are 4 characteristics in a jealous person, and then identified that one of those characteristics is a person who is, easily jealous but controls himself easily. Exactly the same thing I could have created, and I could have done this thing and shown this lesson of that you have to control yourself. Why do we do it by anger? What is the power of anger? What is the problem with anger that we needed to teach it specifically with anger? So I'm going to tell you something, I think, which is amazing, practical, and very, very, very critical. Talmud tells us that there are really 3 fundamental damages that take place when a person gets angry. The first damage is the damage to the person themselves. That the pasuk says, "Kikas b'cheik ksilim yunoch." Anger lies in the lap of ksilim, of fools. Now, an angry person, you can call him obnoxious, a pain in the neck, difficult to get along with. But why do we call him a fool? Spend a little more time on this later, but I'm going to answer it now. Because what's a fool? So in Mishlei, in Proverbs, where this verse comes from, we speak a lot about fools, and there are different types of fools. You should just know that if somebody calls you a fool, you really should ask them, which kind of fool are you talking about? What kind of fool do you take me for? Because there are many different types of fools. One of the types of fools that Mishlei speaks of very often is a person who doesn't see the whole picture. Is a person who sees only part of the picture and almost like religiously focuses on a part of the picture and doesn't allow themselves to see the entire thing. There was a movie, My Favorite Martian. Now, for Americans, I don't believe this was necessarily in other countries, but as a child growing up, there was a television program of My Favorite Martian. And it was one of my favorite shows. If you'd like to know what time it was on and what channel, I can tell you at another time. I could also tell you 75 other shows, what time they were on, what day, what channel. That's a whole other story. We'll get to that some other time. But this show was just a cute, wonderful, very, very just wholesome family fun show. The movie wasn't as wholesome. But that's fine. But the beginning of the movie, when they turned this into a movie, the beginning of the movie was a Musar sefer. The beginning of the movie was an incredible Musar lesson. What happens in the beginning of the movie? There's a spaceship that lands on Mars, and it's traveling on Mars, and it's traveling over the planet, and they keep going back to ground control in Houston, and ground control. There's nobody here. It's empty. And it's having this whole conversation saying there's nobody here. It's an empty planet. It's desolate. There's nothing here. And they drive along, and they get to like the edge of a mountain, the edge of a cliff, and they ride up to the edge of the cliff, and they look out and they see the whole vast expanse of the planet, and they say, nope, there's nothing here. And they turn around and go back, and then the camera pans down, and right underneath this cliff was about 1 million Martians having a rave. They were dancing and singing and bopping along, drinking beers. It was a very, very, very cute scene, but it was a description of a ksil, of a fool, because you got right up to the edge, and you just didn't look down. And if you just would have looked down, you would have seen what you were looking for. A ksil, a fool, when we say on Friday night in our davening, Ish ba'ar lo yeda, uchsil lo yovin ezos. An ish bar, a person who's a boor, lo yeda, is not going to know, because a boor doesn't know, he doesn't have the knowledge, he doesn't have the capacity. But a ksil, a person who's a fool, lo yovin ezos, is not going to understand this. What's this? I'll do this very quickly. The word zot is numerical value 408. We say the world stands on three things: Torah, avoda, gemilus chasadim. Torah, service to God, and a relationship with other people. Relationship with yourself, God, others. That's the foundation of the world. We learned that in the first chapter of Pirkei Avos. We then said that those three things boil down to their lowest common denominator. You know, on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, we say tshuva, tefillah, tzedakah, rip up an evil decree, prayer, repentance, charity. That's Torah, avoda, gemilus chasadim. It's the three of those things brought down one more level. If you look in a machzor on top of those three things, you will see, when it says tshuva, tefillah, tzedakah, you'll see on top in the machzor little letters that are written tzom, kol, mammon. Tzom means fasting, kol means voice, mammon means money. Those three things, tzom, kol, mammon, appear over tshuva, tefillah, tzedakah, which is the corollary to Torah, avoda, gemilus chasadim. What's tzom, kol, mammon? Fasting is the way you do tshuva. Voice is the way you pray. Money is the way you give to other people. The numerical value of tzom, 136. The numerical value of kol, 136. The numerical value of mammon, 136. Because what our rabbis are teaching us is that those three things are the fundamentals of this world, and they're equal to each other. Torah, avodah, gemilus chasadim. You need to have a full diet. A person who doesn't have a full diet, who has Torah and avodah, a person loves Torah, loves praying, serving God. Other people, not so much, right? Or a person who just loves other people, not so much into the Kiddush and Shabbos and other stuff kind of thing. That's all of that beautiful, ksil, because it's not the whole picture. You're only seeing part of the picture. If you have two of the legs, not three of the legs, and you can combo them any way you want. But if you have two and not three, then you don't have the whole picture. Ish bar lo yeda, 136, 136, 136 equals 408. Ish bar lo yedu a ksil, a fool who doesn't see the whole picture, lo yovin zos, is never going to get zos. Numerical value of the word zos, 408. He's never going to see the whole picture. Torah, avodah, gemilus chasadim. All he is going to see is he's going to see a part of the picture, and that's a ksil, that's a fool. How many times it happened that somebody, you look at somebody doing something, you jump to a conclusion, you say to that person what you thought the conclusion was, why they did what they did, and then explain to you the whole story, right? You see a person, whatever, standing off, right? And you say to the person, I was really offended by the fact you said off. You said, I'm really sorry, my mom died today. So, you didn't get the whole picture. Yeah, and you didn't even ask the person to be able to see the whole picture. And what do you feel like? Come on, fill in the blank. I feel like such a fool. Because that's what a fool is. That's what a ksil is. Ksil is a person who doesn't see the whole picture. When you get angry, you become a fool. Because 99.999% of the time, and again, we're going to spend time on this, and hopefully we'll have enough time tonight, we'll spend time on this in a few minutes. But 99.999% of the time, you know why you're getting angry? Because you're not seeing the whole picture. Because all you're seeing is a part of the picture. You're focusing on a part of the picture. You don't know all the facts. You don't know everything. And that just builds that anger inside of you. Because you made an assumption of what you think you're looking at. And then you find out you're not even looking at that. That's a ksil. That's a fool. That's what the pasuk is saying. That that anger lies in the lap of the ksilim, in the lap of the fools. And you become a fool. You become an unfinished person when you get angry. It also keeps you angry, keeps you negative, keeps you committed to hating. When you get angry, you hold on to that anger and you hold on to that, to the hatred you have towards that person. Very often when the acute anger leaves, the hatred stays. And 50, 60, 70 years later, you're still hating that person, but for the life of you, you can't remember where you put your keys and why you're still angry at that person, right? You have just, you hit a point in your life that you don't even know why you're that way, but nevertheless, because it burnt inside of you, it left that scar of anger, and that scar of anger stays. You lose perspective when you get angry. When a person gets angry and they fly off the handle, they can't see anything anymore. They become blinded. It ruins the sight of a person, anger, because they can't even think rationally for a moment. Okay, that's the first damage. Second damage, and the truth is I could spend much more time on that, but I just want to give, I want to give a picture here. The second damage is you're damaged with other people. It damages relationships. Nobody wants to be around an angry person. Nobody wants to be around the person. You know, the first time you're starting to get to know a person, you see that they get a little sahist about things, right? They get a little, and you call it their quirk. You know, they're a little bit quirky. They got a little bit of an idiosyncrasy, a little, you know, it's cute. You can deal with it. But then when it's all the time, it's like, and it's always angry and angry. It's like, go away. I'm just trying to be happy. I don't need that in my life. I don't need that energy around me. A person who gets angry says things that they can't fix. They fly off the handle to such an extent that they end up saying things they can't fix them. And the person often they will lash out at is the person that's standing closest to them, which is really the person that's trying to help them the most. And that's the person that they lash out to. You can deal with that lashing out one time, you can deal with that lashing out 2 times, but after that lashing out becomes a pattern, so then you end up either separating yourself physically from it or separating yourself emotionally from it, and the person is there, but they're not really there, and you're not really connected to them. A person who gets angry does things that they can't undo. They burn everybody near them. And that's the second damage of anger. The second damage of anger is that it damages relationships. The third thing that it does is that it not only damages you and your personality, but it empties you of your relationship with God. It empties you of your ruchnius, of your spirituality. You try to daven while you're angry. There's a halacha that says, we don't necessarily paskin like this halacha to practically apply this halacha because it would mean a person would never daven. But the halacha says that a person who's angry doesn't daven. So, you know, you just got your excuse. You get up there after 120 and God says, how come you didn't daven? I didn't see one day ever in your whole life. You lived 120 years. How come you didn't daven? God, I was so angry from the day I was born until the day I died. I couldn't daven. But you told me that I was off the hook. You told me that an angry person doesn't have to daven. So a person who's angry, he can't have kavanah. Because who's the only person you're thinking about when you're angry? You think about you. You can't have kavanah. How could you have kavanah? You think of God. How could you think about God at a moment when your whole life, right now, this second, everything is just focused on me? You can't accept any kind of criticism. You can't grow when you're angry. Because again, focus is completely on you, and you can't step outside of yourself because you're so caught up in yourself. You know, it says that every night that Hashem writes our averos, our transgressions, down in the book. The question is whether God writes it or whether we write it. It doesn't make a difference for now. You know, on Rosh Hashanah Kippur, in the Masana Taika, if you look at it carefully, it seems that we actually write down our averos in the book. We record our own averos, but it's immaterial. The point is that the Gemara says that if a person, at the end of the day, if a person had anger that day, then only one avera, only one transgression is written down. And that's the anger. Because everything else comes from that anger. Because when a person is angry, so then they end up doing things that they would never normally do. They end up committing transgressions. They end up doing things that would not be the norm for that person. This is the damage of anger, of kas. Our rabbis tell us something unbelievable about kas. They say when a person gets angry, if they're a Talmid Chacham, a Torah scholar, they lose their Torah. If they are a Navi, if they are a prophet, then they lose their prophecy. Now, I have a few problems with that. Well, let me just tell you that the Gemara actually brings examples from Moshe. Let me try that one more time. It's late at night. I see the shock value wasn't strong enough. Let me say it again. The Gemara brings examples from Moshe. That Moshe Rabbeinu got angry 3 times in his career, and every time he got angry, if you look at the Torah, you will see that he forgot a halacha, that he forgot a law, and it had to be taught by someone else. One of the times he got angry, it was justifiable that he got angry. They sent them out to do war and to kill the Amalekites. They came back with the very things with the Moabites, and they came back with the very thing that he told them to go and to destroy, which was the women who were there for prostitution and caused a tremendous plague in the Jewish people, and they brought them back as spoils of war. Like, what's the matter with you people? Don't you get it? So it was justified in being angry. But he got angry, he lost his Torah, and the very next section, which teaches about koshering vessels, is taught by Elazar, the son of Aaron the Kohen, his nephew. Elazar has nothing to do with halachas, nothing to do with the Torah. That wasn't his job, but he needed to step in because Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't teach it because he forgot it. Because that's what happens when you get angry, you lose your Torah. Is that a punishment? I think that most people would say, yeah, it's a punishment. God's punishing you because you got angry, so but God's punishing you. But if God's punishing you, then what's the midah connected midah? What's the measure for measure? You get angry, you lose your Torah. Where's the connection between the Torah and your anger? That becomes measure. We know that God only punishes measure for measure. We don't always recognize what the measure for measure is, but God punishes measure for measure. So there's a great rabbi by the name of Reb Chaim Shmulevitz who said something unbelievable. And he said that at the end of the day, it's not a punishment. It's a reality. And he explains like this. In no other discipline in the world do you have to be what you are teaching. If you are a genius in math, you do not need to be a moral person. You do not need to be a triangle. You don't need to be what you're teaching. You can teach one thing and be something completely different. We're watching that now with our government. We'll talk about that another time. But you do not have to be a moral, ethical being. You can excel in our world, in the world we live in. You can be almost a leader in the world that we live in and be personally empty of any kind of morality and any kind of value system. In Torah, that can't happen. In Torah, if a person is going to lead in Torah, if a person is going to be a Talmid Chacham is not only an attestation to a person's knowledge, but being a Talmid Chacham is that this person is a noah doresh v'noah mekayim. That not only does he darshan, does he expound beautifully, but he lives by his word beautifully. By Torah can only live inside of a beautiful vessel. And if you break the vessel, by definition, the Torah is going to seep out. It's not a punishment. When you walk over to a glass and you smack the glass and the glass breaks and the water drips out of the glass, it's not, you're not being punished. Keli lama zaftani, God, why did you forsake me and let the water drip out of the glass? You idiot, you broke the glass. When you break the glass, that's what's going to happen. The contents are going to spill out. When it comes to a person's character, if a person breaks the character, if a person puts a hole in the character, puts a hole in the kli, in the vessel, in the glass, by definition, the contents are going to seep out. And that's what happened when Moshe Rabbeinu got angry. Torah needs a beautiful kli, and the kli was broken. And when it breaks, everything seeps out. Beautiful. We're getting a picture of how serious anger is, what kind of fire anger is, what kind of damage it does to a person, what it empties a person of. It breaks a person's vessel. But why? Why is kas so terrible? Because at the end of the day, something else is controlling you. Because when a person gets angry, they lose their sense of control. And when something other than God and God's will is controlling you, so then that is tantamount to avodah zarah, to idolatry. Our rabbis say that any person that gets angry is kilu ovid avodah zarah, is like they worshipped idols. It's not just disgusting to see a person angry. It's not just damaging to get hurt by a person's anger, but the person becomes a full-blown idolater because something else is making your decisions for you. Something else other than you and God. How does that something else get in control, though? Because at the end of the day, we believe that we control our world. Now, I know you're all going to say, no, Rabbi, I don't really believe that. I really do believe that God controls the world. Really? Then why'd you get so angry when somebody didn't do what you asked them to do? Only if you control the world would there be a reaction of anger. There could be a reaction of disappointment when you had an expectation of a person that didn't live up to it. But at the end of the day, you're your own person. Do whatever you want. Knock yourself out. I don't control you. I can suggest to you. I can tell you what I think is right. I can tell you what I think is good. I can give you the guidance that I need to give you. But I can't do more than that. I can lead you to the water, but I can't make you drink. And if that's the case, when I'm angry at you because you didn't drink, that means I thought that I could get you to drink. That means that I thought I controlled that. And that's when anger comes. When I come to the realization that I am not in control and I don't give up that control, I hold on to it as tightly as I can because I assume that I'm running the show. And that's why kas is so damaging. And that's why when a person recognizes that they have a nature that could get angry and stay angry, and we have to learn how to control that. We're not just learning how to control anger. We're learning ultimately how to control our understanding of our place in the world and our understanding that we are not in control. And that the master of the universe, the Ribono Shel Olam, is the one who calls the shots and the one who pulls the punches, and it is not us. And therefore, when you want to understand your nature, and you want to learn how to control your nature, then the most important place to begin that quest, to begin that activity of learning how to control your nature is within the context of your disposition, within the context of anger. Because the first thing in a human being that needs to be controlled is their anger. Why? Because ultimately your anger is connected to your belief in God and an all-powerful God that runs and controls the world. And if you don't have that, then it's very difficult to exercise valuable change in the rest of your personality and the rest of your life. Because if God's not in control and I'm in control, I'm good with this. I'm good with the way I am. But if I recognize that God has an expectation of me, and his expectation of me is to be in control of myself, which is the only thing in the world that I control, is myself and my reactions. So I start in this area, which is the area, kas, anger, is the area where we ultimately are recognizing, both verbally and also in our actions and in our outlook, we're recognizing that God controls the world. Let's talk for a few minutes about some ways to control anger. So I'm going to tell you what to me is a fundamental principle. If you look in the Svarim, you look in the books that talk about anger, you will find the following things. You will find that Adam nifel kfi pulasa, that a person is shaped according to the way they act. We learned that from the Paschal Lamb. There's a mitzvah in the Torah, one of the 613 commandments, that you're not allowed to break a bone of the Paschal lamb. Etzem lo tishbru bo. Really? 613 commandments. Don't kill, don't steal, don't break a bone of the Pesach lamb. What are you talking about? Really? That's like one of the most important 613 commandments in the Torah? Don't break a bone of the Pesach lamb? And why not? What's the most geschmacka part of a piece of meat? It's when you finish the meat, you suck on the bone. And if it's a marrow bone, oh, Peter, it's like Olam Haba. You know, a good cholent with a cholent bone that's got a little hole in it, and you can suck the stuff out. It's great. Now, you wouldn't do that on a date, right? It's not the most couth thing to do in the world. To do, you know, it's you don't really get an image of like a very well refined kind of person, but you know, who cares? It's good. It's delicious. So why would the Torah say Pesach night? You sit in a Pesach Seder, don't suck on the bones, really? And you have to command me of that? Yeah, because what the Torah is telling us like this. You need to achieve something tonight. You need to become a free person. You know how to become a free person? Act like a free person. Behave like royalty, and you'll be royalty. Behave like that's who you are, and that's who you will become. Adam nifal kfi pulasai. A person is shaped according to the way they act. You want to be a benevolent person? Act benevolently. You want to be a patient person? Act patiently. You want to be a person who's not angry? Then act not angry. And eventually you will become a patient, non-angry person. Our rabbis tell us, speak benachas, speak softly. Never raise your voice. Talk softly, calmly, especially when a person is going after you. Our rabbis say that a person should take a certain amount of time during the day and during that time, 15 minutes, a half hour, no matter what happens, a person trains themselves into being calm and relaxed and accepting. Our rabbis tell us that another way that we have to control our anger is when somebody does something that angers you, take a moment, don't react, regroup inside. If you need to, go to sleep and deal with it in the morning. And in the morning, when you get a little distance from it, it will look completely different. Another eitzah, another piece of advice our rabbis give. Ask yourself the following question when you get angry. Is this the hill I want to die on? Is this the battle that I want to bring me down on? I want to bring this relationship down on? If it is, then go for it. But if it's not, then relax and calm down. Ask yourself another question. In 5 years' time, is this issue going to matter to me? Because if it's not going to matter, then you're making too big a deal out of it. And all of that helps us calm down and gain a different perspective. But I'll tell you, you can quote me, none of that works. We've spoken together many times about Lashinara and about the idea of how do you control Lashinara. And there are books written about how to control Lashinara with all kinds of eitzahs, all kinds of counsel and advice. There's even this thing I've spoken about many times called machsom lefi, where you close your mouth from speaking Lashon Hara. You pick an hour a day and you say, I'm not going to speak Lashon Hara during that hour. And then that trains you how not to speak the rest of the day. Baloney, it doesn't train nothing. All it does is during that hour, you won't speak Lashon Hara. Somebody, you say, I'm going to 2 to 3, I'm not going to speak Lashon Hara. 5 minutes to 3, somebody calls you and says, you're not going to believe what happened. I can't believe it. Do me a favor, call me back in 5 minutes, because then my hour's up and I'll be able to talk to you. It doesn't change anything. Somebody said you staple your mouth shut. You get this big stapler. You sew it shut, right? You get it surgically shut. You're not going to speak Lashon Hara. Don't worry. You have eyes. You'll give a little, right? You'll do it with the nose. You'll be able to speak Lashon Hara. It's not going to change anything. There's only one thing that's going to change Lashon Hara, and that's your attitude to people. That if my basic attitude to you is that you are awesome, you might have done a little stupid thing, could be, but You're an awesome person. There is nothing. What am I speaking about? What am I talking about? I love you. I think you're amazing. I appreciate everything you do for me. I appreciate your existence in my life. What am I going to talk bad about you for? Only if you change your perspective are you going to change the action of speaking Lashinara. And that's the same thing with kas. It's only until the moment that you recognize you're not in control. I did my effort. I did what I could do. And whatever the outcome is going to be, it's going to be. It's out of my hands. It's out of my hands. Nothing I can do. There's no reason to get angry. I go on a vacation and I go to I do a VRBO, and I rent a house that looks like Azovia Palace. I would want to live in this my whole life. You get there, and it is a rat infested. It's happened to me many times. It is a rat infested hole. Now you could look at it and go, I can't believe that happened. You look at it and you go, okay, plan B. You look around and you look at it and you go, you know what? It's really interesting. This is like a quirky place. This is interesting. And then you change that perspective and suddenly you're not angry. You're going to try to figure out exactly how you're going to stay in this place for 2 weeks. But okay, but you're not angry because you're not in control of it. I can't do anything about this. This is out of my hands. I did what I could do and now it is. Look, when a person, God forbid, goes through a difficulty in their lives, one of the stages that a person goes through is anger. Why is a person going through a stage of anger? Because they're realizing they thought they were in control and now they're not in control. And they become angry at that. And then they calm down from that when they realize, you know what? I'm not in control. Just give it up. It is what it is. Look, if Corona hasn't taught this to us, we are thick like bricks. Because I've mentioned this many times. Every single one of us has had a plan that's been ruined. Every one of us has had some idea in their mind of something that was supposed to happen a certain way and didn't, from Pesach until now. And the longer we go, the more these things happen. And you could walk around like a very angry person, or you could just walk around and say, it is what it is, because I'm not in control. I did my job. I controlled me, but I can't control the situation. And until we do that and get to that place, anger is never going to change. And that's why all those answers that our rabbis gave us are great to get us to a point, but they're not going to control our anger. The only thing that's ever going to really ultimately control our anger is going to be our understanding of who runs the world. And that's ultimately what we're trying to achieve in this Mishnah. In this Mishnah, it's trying to tell us that we have the ability to be able to control ourselves. Recognize your nature. Recognize what that nature is. Recognize the negative parts of that nature. And now you can exercise control over you. Not over anything else that happens, but you can recognize it over you. And the first place to recognize that it's you who you can control and your reactions who you can control, but not the world, do that within the context of anger, and you will become an incredible person. Step 2 into becoming a righteous person. That's the way I see this Mishnah. Next week, we get on to also an incredible Mishnah. And the Mishnah talks about 4 ways of students, the 4 different characteristics in students, which is going to take this issue and just make it, exacerbate it, of why do I need to know? There's no value judgment in that next Mishnah. It doesn't say this is a righteous person, not a righteous person. It's just 4 different ways to learn. What does that do for me? How does that make me a better person? What's the ethical lesson there? Anyway, we'll get to that next week. Okay, my thoughts. Floor is open. We have a couple of minutes. I want you to get your money's worth. So, if anybody has any questions about this subject, any subject is fine. Or you can just say hello. Yeah.
Can I just make a comment?
Sure.
I just wondered, in the context of what you're about anger, I just wondered, is it relevant that it happens to be one of the 2 features that you should not be in the middle ground, that you should take an extreme position in?
Yeah, because it is so horrific anger, right? And it's so damaging that that's the reason why we have to go. And so damaging. And the statement that it's making, which is that I'm in control, not God. So that is so horrific. That's why we have to go all the way to the extreme. Most of the things that we do, as Neil mentioned, we do in the middle. We try to, it's the Rambam's golden rule, right? The golden mean, but not in this. In anger, you have to go all the way to the other extreme, and a person has to get to a place of not being angry. And again, Neil, the way, when they talk about that, how do you get to the other side? They say, you talk calmly and blah, 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 and all that. That's where they give those pieces of advice. And that's where I'm saying that that's not enough. That there has to be a perspective change in order to be able to get to, ultimately to get to the, to a comfortable place. There has to be that perspective check. It's a very good point. There is one place you're allowed to be angry. If your food gets burnt. No, there's one place that you're allowed to get angry. Religious indignation.
You see somebody violating the Torah.
Say it again.
We see anyone violating the Torah.
That's right. You see somebody violating Torah and violating God's honor.
Right.
So then there we have an obligation to stand up for God's honor. And their anger is an acceptable motivation, because I'm not angry about me. I'm angry that person is doing that to my God. Do anybody have an example in the Torah for that? Easy one.
Moshe Rabbeinu.
No, Moshe Rabbeinu, the problem was that he acted in anger, and he got a little mixed into that. It was a little bit of a personal affront. It wasn't just an affront for God. But where does it say the words Bekanoas Kinasi, that he was jealous of my jealousy, jealous of my honor? Who does it say that by? Pinchas. Right, Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aaron HaKohen. Right, he was a grandson of Aaron, and he eventually became a Kohen Gadol. He wasn't originally a Kohen Gadol, but he became a Kohen Gadol, became a high priest. And he watched the Midianite women. He watched them enticing the Jewish men, and then he saw one of the princes of the Jewish people, right, take a prostitute and carry her through the camp and bring her into his tent. So Pinchas took a spear, and he went and he speared the genitalia of the two of them. Notice he hit them in a way that he was able to spear both their genitalia. He killed the two of them. And that was an act of anger. There was an act of righteous anger. But that kind of anger, it was specifically because they were doing something against God. Now, it's difficult for us to get to that place because we're so mixed in with ourselves, right? We've got such large egos that it's very difficult to say that I'm doing this strictly for God. But if I could get myself to that place, then anger would be acceptable.
It's
okay.
Not strictly speaking only anger. That's really zealotry, right? I mean, it's
zealotry, but zealotry, the fuel of zealotry is anger.
Anger for a high purpose.
It's anger for a high purpose. That's right. And that would be acceptable. That would be acceptable. The truth is, nowadays, though, it doesn't really apply. If you see somebody desecrating the Shabbos, you see somebody doing something, they're not doing it against God. Even if they think they know God and you think they know God, they're not doing it against God. They're doing it because they don't understand.
Ignorant.
Yeah, they don't understand. I don't want to use that word ignorance. It's a lack of understanding, because they could actually be very knowledgeable. They could be very knowledgeable, but it's not the knowledge. It's the lack of understanding of what the knowledge is, the lack of the spiritual connection, and that's the reason why they're behaving the way they do. The only thing that's gonna change that is love. Right. And the only thing anger is going to do is anger is going to slice the person, just send them on their way. And that's nowadays, even when you deal in religious communities, when you have kids that go off the derech, right? Kids that become less religious. So anger is the last tool. It's not even a tool, and you can't use anger because we're not holding in that place. Because they're not. That's not why they're doing it. They're not really rebelling. They're not getting it. They're square pegs trying to be put into round holes. They're not fitting. It's a whole myriad of problems. It's not just because a person is rebelling against God. Sure. Okay, beautiful. We'll stop there.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Everybody should have an awesome week. Next week in Mitzvah Hashem, I will be alone in Israel, and I say alone because I got to go into 2 weeks of quarantine when I get back. So it's called bidud. So I will be bidudicating in Israel, and Mirz Hashem, I'll get out of that soon. This too shall pass.
Where are you now?
Travel well. Thank you.
I'm right now in Houston. I'm still in Houston. Yeah, I'm leaving tomorrow. Okay, take care, everyone. We'll see you, Mirz Hashem.
In a good show, Rabbi.
Amen. Amen. Thank you very much.
Have a good trip.
Take care.
Toda.
Good night, everyone.